And, and what happened was that towards the end of the 11th century, for purely political reasons, the gates of ijtihad, or the doors of independent thinking, closed. They narrowed in many parts of the world and then closed altogether in some parts of.
Do you see a connection between, for example, in the olden days, Islamic scholars were also scientists and explorers. They explore and they look for knowledge rather than just looking at religious texts. And so, for example, we have Ibn Sina, Ibn Rushd, and Ibn Khaldun. All of them are not only scholars but scientists. So, is this what happened when Islamic knowledge ceased to be about exploring the world into dogma?
Yes, I do believe that this is about the time when Islam congealed, calcified into a faith, from a faith, into a dogma. Now let me first explain what I mean by the difference between faith and dogma. Faith is a relationship of trust between you and your creator. It's deeply personal, and that trust allows you to experiment and explore, which is what really the early Muslims of the Islamic civilization did. They experimented and explored with faith, along with other disciplines such as science, poetry, art, agriculture, even fashion. And what happened was that towards the end of the 11th century, for purely political reasons, the gates of ijtihad, or the doors of independent thinking, closed. They narrowed in many parts of the world and then closed altogether in some parts of the world. And in so doing, that faith, which allowed Muslim thinkers to experiment, knowing that they had God's trust in their niyat, in their intentions, that faith became dogma. And dogma is always threatened by questions, because dogma, by definition, is rigid and fragile, and it snaps under the spotlight of scrutiny. Because in the Quran itself, there are 3 times as many verses calling on Muslims to think and analyze and reflect and rethink, instead of verses that tell us only what is right or only what is wrong. The verses in the Quran very much advocate the need to use the brain and the free will and the conscience that Allah has given to all of us in order to, first of all, keep thinking, but also there's a reason to continue to think. And this is humility. You know, there's a beautiful passage in the Quran, chapter 3, verse 7, which states, some of the passages in this book, meaning the Quran, are precise, and other passages are vague. And only those with disbelief in their hearts will be focusing on the vague passages in order to dictate certain interpretations. And then this particular verse ends in an ingenious way. It says, believers, understand that only your Lord knows the full and final truth of these verses. Well, this is a clear call to remain humble. Well, I don't think that actually my approach to Islam is so different from what existed, 1,000 years ago, except for the fact that it addresses 21st century issues rather than 11th century issues. So this is why I certainly call myself a faithful Muslim. But it also means that when I am challenged by questions, whether from Muslims or from non-Muslims, frankly, I don't need to get defensive about those questions, because at the end of the day, my faith is in God, not in God's self-appointed ambassadors, imams and mullahs. And similarly, God has faith in me to grow, to evolve, because any creator that is worthy of worship is not so petty that he manufactures robots and automatons and what we would call widgets. Man makes machines, but God creates uniqueness. I base my my interpretation of the Quran on the Quran. Hadith, please. I mean, this is completely man-made, and there is no evidence whatsoever that hadith are anything but man-made. So I don't feel the need to justify my point of view on what came after the Quran. And Islamic law, once again, man-made. And the point is that human beings are imperfect. Of course we are. We're not God. So any of these laws, any of these hadith, will have imperfection built into them. Let's just be honest about that. And I am one of many, many people around the world who are part of what is being called a Quran-only movement. And I think that if we can see that there is a growing groundswell for exploring the Quran as a living, breathing, evolving text, then we can also see that we can remain very happily within our faith at the same time as thinking freely.
MalaysiaKini.com.
Pada Malaysia kini.
Pada Malaysia kini.